Welcome to another episode of the Black Ministers podcast. I'm your host, Nate Bird. I'm here with my co-host,
Rachel Weaver. We are so excited to be back with you guys this week. And obviously, we're in a new place and a new setting, which is exciting.
Huge shout out to John DeLynn for allowing us to use his studio. We're loving the setup, and we're looking forward to being able to do a little bit more. And we have a super exciting guest on the show today, an intersectional icon here in Utah. Stacey, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hey, my name is Stacey Harkey. I'm excited to be here. I've been a fan of the Black Ministers for a while, so yeah, I'm stoked.
Good stuff. Yeah, so we reached out to Stacey to be on the podcast, and we're looking forward to talking with him. But before we do, you know what it is. We got the Minutes moment. Rachel, take it away.
Okay, so I already forgot how to say the name. It's very much okay, but you can jump in if you remember. But this week, I wanted to highlight someone in the AANPI community because it's that month, their Heritage Month, before we ended. And so the person that I'm highlighting is Mabel Ping Wah. Yes, it's H, and I knew it wasn't pronounced as an H, so thank you, Wah Lee. And she is a Chinese and American women's rights activist. And so a little bit about her. She was born in China in 1896 and came to the U.S. at the age of 9 on a scholarship that granted her a visa to attend school in the U.S. And then her father, who was a missionary, ended up moved to the United States 5 years before that, and he was a Baptist minister of Morningside Mission in Chinatown in New York. And then at 16, she was accepted to Barnard College, which is kind of a big deal considering she was an immigrant.
Yeah.
But some cool things about her activism. It started in 1912. She joined a suffrage meeting held in Chinatown with other members of the community. And that is where she met like other white suffrage leaders. And through just her activism and what she was doing, the suffrage leaders, the white women, were inspired by her, and they wanted her to be a part of planning the parade that they had in New York City. And so during that time, she started working with these white women suffrage leaders, which eventually, most of the time she was focused on issues surrounding white women and educating on how issues in the Chinese community overlapped. But this is also when she wanted to kind of take up working on getting people registered who are Chinese to vote, because that's what they were working on, to getting women the right to vote. And so in 1917, New York granted women the right to vote. And then 2 years later, Congress passed the 19th Amendment, which made it a federal legislation. But due to the Naturalization Act of 1790, it said that only people who were of white descent were eligible for naturalization. And so her and people who were non-white immigrants were not able to be seen as citizens and were not able to vote. But in spite of this, she still worked towards helping towards making this change. And in 1912, she became the first Chinese woman to earn a doctorate degree in economics from Columbia. And then she helped when Congress eventually passed the Immigration Act of 1924, in 1924, Congress passed this ban on immigration from Asia, which put on a lot of restrictions and all these things. And then World War II happened, and a lot of issues with the immigration from that happened as well. And then eventually, towards the end of her career, she was able to work towards helping just more women to be able to vote. And then in 1966, that's when she passed away. And then on December 3rd, 2018, Chinatown named a post office after her because of all the work that she did, helping with not just women's rights, but specifically with Chinese American rights, and specifically in New York, she was a big help. And so I just wanted to highlight her because I never knew who she was, nor I feel like, we don't really view the AANPI community as people who are activists, just because of a lot of stereotypes and model minority myths. That's something that they historically haven't leaned into, but their community has always fought for rights. And I think we should share their stories more. So that's how I wanted to share today. And I hope that we hear more stories as this month becomes a bigger celebration. We just did something at my job today about it. And is just something that I want to personally learn more about. And I hope that we as a society continue to support the activism from this community because they've been doing work for a long time.
We love that. Also,
Yes.
love that she has a post office, but we need like a statue.
Yeah.
It's at a post office, and I was like, okay, we could do better for Ping.
Well, I mean, because if we think about it, like in New York specifically, they have more Asian people in New York than like any other city in the United States, and there is a lot of poverty as well, even today, that still exists among the Asian communities there. And also something I learned at work today was that the Asian community has like the highest wealth disparity within it because of so much like just hyperselectivity with immigration, but also like still dealing with very real issues that come when you are an immigrant. And so that's why a lot of the stereotypes associated with the community are so harmful, because it doesn't acknowledge in the ways in which poverty still affects their community.
Wow, interesting. Y'all got me learning already.
Yes.
You said hyperselectivity. Is that like when people apply to come over, it's like only taking people that fall into certain categories?
Yeah, well,
and so we get like...
I mean, something that I learned in my undergraduate degree was just that, you know, only a certain percent, less than 10% of people in China, for example, have a bachelor's degree, but over 55% of people who immigrate from China have a bachelor's degree. Right? Like looking at those numbers, that's a very specific group of people that are coming. It doesn't reflect the whole group. And also that's a very small set of people who, obviously college educated people in general, are going to have their children live a different life than people who are not college educated, white, black, Asian, whatever the race or ethnicity. And so because they're hyperly selected from Asia when they come here, that's part of why some of those stereotypes exist in the community, because it's like, yeah, their parents had doctorate degrees. It makes sense that their children are extremely educated. Same way if you meet black people whose parents were doctors, it's going to be the same thing.
Interesting. All right,
that's very true. It's super interesting. And yeah, like the whole thing, like with immigration, I just think about that. Even like the way that it's named, like naturalization, becoming a natural citizen of the United States, is crazy, because it's like, you think about, like, they made that rule where only white people were eligible to become citizens of the United States,
which is strange.
Yeah, it's very
because it included
like,
European countries.
Yeah,
in European countries, people who immigrated from Europe were able to become citizens.
Are you talking about recently or like back in the day?
No, this is back.
Okay, for a second, I was like, wait a minute.
No, that changed. But that was the law. Like, it was literally what they decided, which was, example, when I took Dr. Rue, I was his TA in his sociology of race class. We talked about this. That's when they changed what whiteness meant. Whiteness meant, they didn't define it up until people from Asia started to immigrate, because they are not Hispanic, they are not black, they are, they're like, wait, technically their skin is white, technically, right? Air quote, if that's what we're going by based off of what they're defining. And then they realized, oh, this is not actually what we want. And so it included like Arab Americans as well, like people who are immigrating from the Middle East. They also were excluded from becoming citizens because they were trying to find a way to make it so that only Irish, those
not even Irish at first.
But when this specific Jews. Law was created, Irish people had already been adopted into what whiteness was.
And even now, like to this day, you can still, like, if you Google the definition of white, it includes people from Northern Africa. So like, it doesn't matter, like, even the color, but it's like the way that they did it geographically. So it's like,
yes,
because Northern Africa was colonized so heavily, like if you're from there, you could be my color, your color, Rachel, Stacey, your color, and you still be like, you still check the white box technically on the census.
I hate that.
Yes, we could do a whole episode on that, on like race and all of that with Dr. Rue. That would be so fun, actually, because
it would be interesting.
Well, because something that's interesting is like Hispanic people, they can check the box white.
Yeah,
because they don't have a race.
It's like in the same sense of, it's like people get that will really like rock people sometimes, and they're like, my race is Hispanic. It's like, oh, it doesn't work like that. It's like there's like nationality, and then there's like, what is it, like ethnicity and like culture, like all those divisions.
Race is based upon, like, you don't pick your race. Other people prescribe what your race kind of is and what you look like and what people perceive you as, because it's based off of, it's like, it's involuntary. Like, you can't just opt in to being like, I am racially black. You can't do that. Or racially You know what I mean? Like
People
you can't
try.
do that. But ethnicity
Don't
is
come
when
for Rachel Dozell. I'm just kidding.
bruh, no comment. But ethnicity is, more you get to opt in and choose like, oh, like someone at my job, she is racially Asian, but she is ethnically Mexican. She grew up in Mexico her entire life, speaks Spanish fluently. When you look at her, she is an Asian woman, right? But she is very much relates ethnically to other Mexican people. And so that's an example of like you get to choose that, and someone can't take your ethnicity away, which is why people who are Hispanic and Latino, they don't have a race because there is no race. Like they are racially white. Like that is what the category
that's
they
an
fall
interesting
under.
step into like white passing and stuff. When people talk about I'm black, but it's like if you're perceived as white,
100%,
then the privileges you experience are a little different. Right. You know what I'm saying?
Very, very different.
Interesting.
Yes. Well, that was great. We'll do another episode about that. We'll ask Dr. Rue to come back. He came back one time and we can have him do a whole lesson on that just because I feel like this is a lesson a lot of people need because so many people are ignorant to actually understanding what the different things mean and how you yourself and other people around you fit into those categories.
And I'm still learning, right? So it's like, I'm like, oh, yeah, tell me, define this. So it's like, everyone could learn a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's helpful. I like it.
Okay. Cool. Well, let's get into the interview portion. But before we ask you any questions, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit more, Stacey? Like tell the listeners where you're from and tell them what brought you to Utah as well. That's what we'll start with. What brought you to Utah? Because that's how we met you. So.
Right. I'm from Dallas, Texas. And what brought me to Utah was school. I came to Utah to go to BYU. I grew up LDS, or some people I know it as Mormon. I don't know why I said it like that.
Mormon. Yeah, I don't know why you said it like that either. I was like, okay.
I was playing like country people like the Mormons. Yeah. So I like came out.
I had a friend in high school who used to be like, you a Mormon.
Yeah.
Like, he would just mess with me like that. No,
wait, where are you from?
Mormon, ain't you? I'm from Michigan.
Oh, Michigan. Okay, yeah. I'd be like Mormons.
Yeah,
like why'd you put like a in there? Anyways, that's what they said in Brazil. I served in LDS mission in Brazil, but I came to BYU. Ended up working for BYU TV.
Oh,
did a show with BYU TV.
Just a small stint.
Oh, I know.
Just a small stint. A little bit.
Did a show called Studio C.
Yes.
Which no one's heard of if you haven't been in Utah. I mean, some people have, but it garnered a little bit of attention. Like we had a chance to perform on NBC's Bring the Funny, which was like a comedy competition show, which only did like one season, I think. But we also did, we had a chance to be on Conan. We got to perform with Keenan from SNL, which was really cool.
Oh, that is cool.
So we had like a little bit of like, we had a good fun run. And we started our own company called JK Studios, and we have a movie coming out soon. And yeah, we're just like still doing stuff. Like,
so is that like the whole original cast? Y'all have a company together?
So the all original cast from Studio C, we started our own company. Just because we were limited to what we could do at BYU TV. We had a good time with Studio C, but we wanted to make more movies, TV shows.
Yeah.
Like we wanted to try our hand at more. And so we left cushy jobs and started our own company. So yeah.
Scary.
Now we're in the struggle again.
Right?
It's temporary though.
It's temporary. Like, fingers crossed. It's temporary. 10 years later, I'm gonna be like, it's temporary.
Man, so what are y'all doing with that company right now? I know you said you have the movie coming out. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, we have a movie called Go West coming out. It's like, I describe it like Monty Python of the Oregon Trail. So we started doing sketch, and so we want to do a movie that has like a bunch of these fun moments. We're going to release it around Pioneer Day in Utah.
That'll be fun.
Yeah, so it's like a little love letter to like our community and like the people, like Utah, these roots, but also like American roots of like pioneers. And like, who didn't play the Oregon Trail growing up, right?
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you could be from any part of America.
I should have died of dysentery a long time ago.
I know, for real, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oof, dysentery get you. But yeah, that's kind of what we're up to now. We're doing other little things, but that's our big project right now. So fingers crossed, go see our movie at the end of July.
Yeah, for sure.
In theaters.
I'll check it out wherever it's going to be. I'll be there.
We'll make it a Black Menace trip. That's what we'll do.
I have to do like a premiere party. We're still deciding what we're going to do.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that'll be a good time for sure. Also, bear with me. I'm operating these cameras manually. I've
yes,
never done this before, so
guys, this is
a whole lot of chaotic camera switching going on. Just,
yes,
if you're listening, don't worry about it. Just forget I said that. But if you're watching,
you might keep it interesting. I like the idea of Rachel being like not saying anything, and the camera keeps going to her. Like,
yes,
okay.
I'm like, I love it. Yeah.
You should be picking my nose. Mind your business.
We got bigger fish to fry if you're like in the middle of this interview with me and you're just like digging for gold.
Right.
Like,
Don't
oh,
want that to
man.
happen.
Well, Stacey, I want to first ask about when you came to BYU, what was your experience like? Considering like looking back, like where you are now, like do you see things differently, or how was it actually when you were in it? How did you feel? Just because I know you can have different feelings in that way. Like it was great at the time, and now looking back, you're like, wait, or was it like not the best at the time, and now you're looking back and like it's worse than I thought, or it was better than you thought. Like, what do you think?
Definitely like loved my time at BYU. I grew up really shy in Texas, Dallas, Texas, and that was the first time I started like coming out of my shell a bit. So I was like making friends and stuff, and like I grew up LDS too, so I was like, oh, like all these people that have like similar styles. But I really do compare Utah. I talk about Utah like it's like what do they call those programs where they would like back in the day they would take like Native American people from their families and like assimilate them? I can't remember what they call those.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I forget the name, but I do know what you're talking about.
That's honestly what I look back on for BYU. I'm like, oh man, that was like assimilation for me. It was like me learning how the group in power in the world, like white people, how they interact, how they work, how they communicate, and how they do all this stuff. And I thought it was fascinating. And it was tough in a lot of ways. A lot of people would be like, I mean, now that we started our own company, we've had this shift, but a lot of my friends would be like, you're so blunt. And now everyone's like, okay, I see that. That's very important. It's just like the honesty aspect that I love, but it comes off as like, you know what I'm talking about?
People used to say it to me.
You're so intense.
No, they say, I remember I was a Relief Society teacher my freshman year, and they'd say, Rachel, you're so real. You just are so real. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? Like,
sister girl.
Yeah, they're like, you just say it how it is. I'm like, yeah, because all of you are just giving fluff all the time.
We don't have time for fluff.
Yes, but
also I want drama.
Yeah.
I want real life.
Yes.
I just talk about, wait, what were you going to say?
I was saying, I want to be as messy as possible.
Yeah.
All the drama.
Yeah.
When I was teaching like different like Sunday school lessons, I wanted to ask the most dramatic question because I was like, I want conversation.
Yes, me too.
That was me too. I was the one who would read like racist quotes from Brigham Young in class and then be like, let's have a discussion.
Let's sit with it.
And just go from there.
I taught a class once back in the days when I was teaching elders quorum. I was just a church group for men. I don't know how many people who was watching, but and basically I was like, hey, we talked about families. We were all like single. And I was like, I mean, we should probably face the facts that some of us won't get married. And people were like, they were like scandalized. And I was like, I am sorry if that makes you nervous, but that's just a reality we might have to face.
So true.
If your value is placed on your worth as a partner, that may not be sustainable or healthy. You know what I mean? But anyways, good times. I did have, though, going back to BYU, it was a very stark, like I had very like stark experiences when it came to race. Like I remember my first week on campus being new, like this poor kid from Dallas in the white world of Utah. And people would walk up to me friendly, right? Yeah. And they'd be like, yo, what's up, my dog? And I'd be like, hi, nice to meet you. And they'd be like, you know what I'm talking about?
Hi, nice to meet you.
I'd be like, hi. And they'd be like, and you could see it on their face where they'd be like, sorry, that's the extent of my Black vocabulary. I got nothing else. And they would like, conversations would go nowhere. People wouldn't know how to relate, even though I'm like, there's a million things we can relate about. Like, do you eat food? Let's talk about food. But it was just people, I could tell they hadn't been around a person of color, a Black person. And so they were like, they just didn't know how to relate. So a lot of my time at BYU was, I look back and I'm like, there were a lot of tough experiences. I'm a pretty make lemonade from lemons kind of guy, but like we can objectively look back and be like, there was some intense things that probably shouldn't have happened, whether it was working for BYU TV or just being a student or just living in Utah. So the whole range. I think as time goes on, I get better at looking back with a more, not even like a patient perspective. Sometimes I am like, okay, this person has no idea that they're coming off this way, but also a more like justified perspective too, to be like, no, that was wrong. That was wrong. There's no like questions about it. No if, ands, or buts. No, but let's consider that. No, it was wrong. You know what I mean? So I don't know.
Absolutely.
That's very vague.
I can definitely relate to that. I feel like I've said this before, but I feel like my experience in Utah has been kind of like being surrounded by a bunch of like Michael Scotts, like from The Office, where everybody is just, they have no self-awareness, when it comes to how they act around other people,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they'll say and do things with good intentions, but just being like woefully ignorant and completely unaware. And so I love The Office. That's one of my like favorite shows.
We love a Michael Scott on TV.
But I feel like that's my experience living in Utah a lot of the times, especially at BYU, because so many people, like you said, had never had a meaningful interaction with a person of color, let alone a Black person. Right. And so for them to be able to like come up to you and try to talk to you, they, like you said, they don't know how to connect if you don't know anything. I remember they would ask me like, oh, have you heard of such and such rapper? And I'd be like, no. And they'd be like, oh, what do I talk to you about? It's like, well, I mean, I don't know. You're eating the same lunch as me. Like we have the same class. I don't know. We're roommates, but you don't have anything to talk with me about. So yeah, I definitely get that. It's tough out here.
I remember that once someone was like, it was when DJ Khaled had just like, he was just starting to get big.
Yeah, DJ.
And someone was like, do you know this guy? And I was like, DJ Khalid? Expose myself.
So
they were like, no, you don't know him. But yeah, it's like people constantly, I hate that when they're like almost like testing your Blackness, where it's like,
oh yeah,
this is a question, and if you answer it the wrong way, this is going to determine how Black you are to me. You know what I mean? I think we actually do it in our own community too. But
you're right.
yeah, but listen, we're not talking about that right now.
Yes,
we'll talk. That's a family discussion.
Yes, that is that's an in-house conversation.
But yeah, people all the time, and I work really hard not to to be my authentic self, like from the way I speak to how my style and everything. It's just like I'm authentically me, and I think you should be authentically you. And it is so frustrating when people are like, but like, where's your grill? Where's your ebonics or something? And I'm like,
man.
I'm like, okay, well, this is good because Black people come in all, different geographic locations, styles, shapes of life. We come in all, we're not all just like athletic and, the hood Wonder Kid story, which we love a good hood Wonder Kid story, but that's just like, Black people are just as diverse as white people, right? In the range of what we represent.
Very true. Especially in Utah, I would say there's a lot more diversity amongst people of color in Utah than there is amongst the general population. Because, a lot of people, they have the same exact life. Like they grew up in a similar area. They might have grown up more affluent. They might have grown up more in the suburbs. But most people, like they grew up LDS, they grew up surrounded by white people. And so their experiences have been very, very similar. And then you get to a place where you start to interact with more people of color, and then that gets challenged, and it creates an interesting dynamic. And BYU was like trying to figure out how to deal with that, with like people having their mindsets challenged in a way that they've never had it before. Like if you're from Utah,
that's really interesting. So you mean like white people in Utah or like Black people in Utah?
So I'm saying that like I would say that the Black people that you meet in Utah are more likely to have like a more diverse experience or background than the average white person that you would meet in Utah. And that's starting to change, it's becoming more diversified, but I think in general, there's a pretty homogenous base in Utah. That's, they're starting to change a little bit, and to, the social media and things like that have kind of differentiated that a little bit. But you go back to, maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago, and things are a lot different now than they were then.
That's really, I've never thought about that. That's really insightful. I want to think on that a little bit more. That's cool.
Yeah.
Oh, good thought.
So you mentioned something about getting to be your authentic self, or working hard to be your authentic self. So, since coming to Utah and then, being here, I remember when you had posted on Facebook and you came out on Facebook.
Did you just out me on the pod? I'm just playing.
I was like, I could have sworn. No, but so like when you came out on Facebook and then moving forward after that, and there's kind of been like a bit of a transformation and a glow up, if you will, right?
Oh,
definitely glow up.
Man.
Yeah.
I was just telling somebody, I saw a video of me back in the day, back in my closeted days, and I look like a Ninja Turtle. Not even like a Ninja Turtle. I just look like a turtle that they made the accountant, because like I look crazy, man. I look crazy.
Not the accountant turtle.
Yeah, I wasn't ninja enough to fight with the other turtles.
Oh man.
But yeah, there was like so I came out in 2018. I'd come to Utah in 2006. It was my freshman year of college. I did the LDS mission, came back, finished my bachelor's. I loved everything. I served in Brazil, loved it. It was good stuff. Enjoyed my time in my undergrad. Had some snafus, but life overall was really good.
Right.
And then I hit this wall, because growing up LDS, right? You're like, you go on the mission and you marry somebody and then you make babies, you multiply and replenish.
They give you the formula.
Yeah. And I was like, ooh, I'm missing a key integral part of this formula. Like the equal sign isn't equalizing. And I tried, I like dated women. I almost got engaged a couple times. Thank goodness I didn't, because I am gay as hell.
Yes.
But I eventually hit like a rock bottom kind of place where I was just like, if I don't do something, I can't keep living this way. Like I felt like I was going to implode. And so I came out in 2018. I came out publicly. Super scary. But you know what? It was so good. So good. I always think of that scripture in the Bible. I can't remember where it is, but someone might know this. Put it in the comments. It says like, by their fruits ye shall know them. And I think they're talking about like prophets, like, if it's a good or bad prophet, because, it's like compared to a tree, you try the fruit. If it's good fruit, it's good. But I think about that in life all the time where I'm like, is something good or bad? I don't know, like try it out. What's your experience with it? And I was so afraid coming out was going to be this like potentially like I was going to be walking into this dangerous part of my life and walking away from the light. And, I don't know. But it has been one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. For me, for my relationships with my loved ones, for the people around me. I'm just like, these are some good fruits, y'all. This is a good tree.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
For sure. And I think that's what's important is it's the journey is different for everybody, right?
Yes.
So for some people, being in the church works. For some people, being closeted works. For some people, being this or that, it works for them for however long. That may not always be the case.
Yeah.
But for some people, where they are right now works. And for other people, it doesn't work. Like, when it doesn't work, you make that transition, right?
Like, for real, like, I love the idea of, like, just empower people to do what works for them. The second you start prescribing people what they need to do to be happy is the second I raise the red flag where I'm like, oh, slow your roll. Your roll. The second, and I think what we experience a lot, and I'm sorry if I'm going off book or whatever, but especially in a state that is incredibly like Mormon, incredibly religious, was like founded on Mormon principles, is I feel like people, because when I came out, people came for me, right?
Really?
Yeah, but like, I was telling y'all this earlier. I was like, I was already black in Utah. I already know it was like being black in Texas. Like, you think you're gonna say something to me about something I can't control and it's my first rodeo? No, get in line. Like, okay, you have a concern with me? Like, take a number, send it to this email address. I'll never check it. Like, good luck, right? But essentially, it's just like the concept. I totally lost my train of thought. I was going on that email thing.
You're good. You were saying that like people came for you.
Yes.
Oh yeah, people were like coming for me, but essentially, like they were just like I didn't know these people. They were so hostile about like they would come and be like, "How dare you? You're disgusting." Never met this person in my life, right?
Wow.
But it was clear to me because I was like, "You don't even know me, so like, why are you so angry or why are you so passionate about this?" And it was easy for me to be like, "This is not my problem. This is a personal thing."
Yeah.
You are, I think, and what my theory a lot is that people are defending paradigms. So they're defending like a thought process or a way of life. Like if I have to accept that you can be happy and gay, that means that my belief system about families might be wrong.
Yep.
And that means that the religion I belong to that teaches that might be wrong. And the family that I've sacrificed so much for, I think they're like protecting these series of dominoes from like falling over. And I think nowadays we find a lot of people who are able to like navigate that in a more nuanced way, right? They're like, oh, like I believe this, but this doesn't really work for me, and like power to them.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of times when people come out hot swinging, I'm like, oh, this isn't about me.
Yeah.
This is about you're fighting something else.
Yeah.
I think
when people have that much hate, they are like what they're doing isn't working for them, right? So it's like you said, they have to like, they're trying to connect all these dots in their head. So it's like, this is working for me, and you're upset about it. That means what you're doing is not working for you, and you just haven't admitted that to yourself yet.
Yes.
It's like I'm not mad.
And also, I feel like a lot of people, more people than we think, especially in these communities, they're afraid of accepting what it would mean. Kind of what you were saying, Stacey, about if it's not true, they're afraid of what that would mean.
Yeah.
And they're like, part of them wants to know though. And I say this because I've gotten into discussions about people dealing with Black people in the church or whatever it may be. And when you start calling people out and they just refuse to see what you're saying, it's like, because you're scared to see what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Because I was scared at a point. I don't know if you related to this at all, Stacey,
100%.
but feeling like things that don't align with like the formula we were talking about.
Yeah.
Like we were given that formula, we wanted to follow it, and if you didn't, it's scary to step away and be like, this isn't gonna work for me, and fall into the authentic self. And I think other people have different ways that they want to be more authentic to themselves. One time I got into an argument with somebody about coffee. Anyway, that's something really small, but like you're getting mad about coffee because other people have a way around that, like other ethnicities and whatever. Like, because you low-key want to do that. Like, you want to be able to do that.
Like, why does it bother
And
you so much?
why does it bother you that other people have a way to experience that same sensation or whatever? Like, you're mad about that. And so I do
think not get mad when people
But does
are,
that
like,
make
doing
sense what
crack.
I'm saying? Like,
I'm
I think other people... They're almost mad when you're living your true self and doing what you want because they secretly want it. Like,
there's probably like a lot of reasons too. Like, I think there's like, and like, call me like optimistic, but I feel like I rarely encountered people that are hateful. They're just scared. They're all scared or insecure. And once again, I'm like, and maybe this is like a way I just deal with people, and maybe it's not the best, and there's gonna be some psychiatrist watching this being like, ooh, that's problematic. But I'm like, so many times when people have issues, I'm like, it's a personal problem. I'm like, this isn't about me. And I think that's helpful for me to like, not take it personal. Because I'm like, oh, this isn't about me. You're way too mad about something that like I don't know what to tell you. Like, sorry if it makes you so mad I'm gay. Like, just stop following me on Instagram. I don't know. Like, don't read my posts. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, good luck. Be straight. I don't know.
And so since like coming out and just like kind of forging like a new path and being more authentic, what has your experience been like in Utah since then? Like, what has it been like kind of diving into the LGBTQ plus community here in Utah, or like figuring out support systems in that space, and just what has that been like? 'Cause I feel like that's navigating a whole new life as well. For my friends that I've heard when they come out and like are a part of communities more publicly, what has that been like for you?
Man, I've just been having a good time with everything. I was really intimidated when I first came out because I was like, and then later I was like, I think I'm going to start dating. And I was like, what if I like go on a dating profile and people are going to be like, actually, you should probably go back in the closet. Like, I was like nervous about that. And no one said that, thank goodness, because that would be really weird. But it's just been like a pretty cool experience. And I feel like you will always meet haters in every like facet of life. Once again, that's a personal problem. They're jealous, insecure, scared, whatever. That's between them and their therapist. I don't know. But I feel like I never want to waste my time trying to win the approval of anyone. Like, if they don't like what I got going on, they could go elsewhere. And like, that's not even like in a shady way. Like, you don't like me, Gus. No, it's just like, you find what works for you. And if that's like, you don't mesh with everybody, and that's okay.
Yep.
Like, whatever. But I feel like my experience, to answer your question, has been really exciting. It's like discovering what my friend compared it to Harry Potter. He's like, you've like always been a wizard your whole life, but now you get a letter to Hogwarts. Like, I was like, oh, snaps. And now it's like, it's kind of like that. I'm like discovering all these things for the first time. Like, my first time kissing a boy and holding hands, I was like, this is what the straighties experience. That's a slur for straight people.
I love that. No, it's true.
I just want you to know I'm very offended by that term.
But like, it's just like, it's like stuff like that, but also the community. It's so, and I think you get this too, like being Black, especially in a space like this, you automatically have something with someone. Like, you see somebody and you're like, you know what I mean? You're like, we're probably gonna, like, they probably get, they crazy. Yeah. And I feel like that being queer in Utah, where I'm like, someone has a little rainbow pin or like a non-binary pin, and I'm automatically like, yeah, you know what it is like. Yeah, comes in by me. You know what I mean? It's that kind of energy. So it's been cool. Like, whether it's like going to like queer clubs and just being able to like let my hair down and dance however I want, or go participate in this like Stonewall sports and like play sports with other queer people. It's just been like a really fun experience. And yes, there is still prejudice. I think we talked about this earlier, right? Where there are different groups of people will be prejudiced, right?
Yeah.
And Utah queer community is not exempt from that. But I'm having a good time.
That's good. That's good. Now, I do want to ask, because that was actually going to be like one of the next things I asked about was about the prejudice in the queer community.
Oh man,
because there's the straighties in Utah, right? And then you got the racism.
we really don't call y'all the straighties. I just want to clarify.
Okay.
We should come up with the heady hets, the heteros.
Okay, I like that though, but I like that.
The heady hets.
I'm like, okay, I like that.
I like that.
I identify as heady het.
Yes.
It's kind of fun though. It's kind of iconic.
Yeah. What was my question? Yeah, so like, how do you deal with prejudice in the queer community, with racism in the queer community? How does that show itself? Is it different from like, regular racism?
There is like a slew of different ways that people can be a little prejudiced or even exclusionary from like other people in the community, like in the queer community here. There's a lot of conversations these days about being masculine versus being perceived as feminine, and how men that come off more masculine are more sought after in the gay community. And in some circles where it's like more lauded and everyone wants to come off as more mask, which is kind of interesting, right? It's all tied to like misogyny.
Yes, it is.
To be perceived as feminine is weak and bad, right? Isn't that sick?
Interesting.
I was talking
patriarchy.
Sorry, side
Please.
note. We were talking with me, my roommate, and my friend about this. We were talking about like attraction and like what are you actually attracted to, masculine or feminine? Because then I was like, there are more masculine presenting women, and like, have you been attracted to that? Yes, you have. And why have you been attracted to that? Like, was it because, like, we were like, let's just be honest here. Let's talk about it. Like, what about that attracted you? And it's like, have there been things about whatever? And so it's interesting. And things, the sociologist in me was like living for that conversation because it's really interesting to see, like, are you really attracted to just male, female, or is it masculine, feminine? Anyway, it's a conversation for another time.
Like, how much is like shaped by our culture,
by
community?
what you are what men are socialized to believe is masculine, and what women are socialized to believe is feminine, which changes like what you're attracted to and gender and all these things. And again, at the end of the day, it all goes out to how it's fluid and whatnot. But back to
listen to that. You can listen to that and be like, well, no, I'm just attracted to what I'm attracted to. I like masculinity. But like, if you look at different cultures and geographic locations, what is feminine and masculine changes.
Yes.
Like I was just telling someone about like, and that's part of the work I do is I do a lot of nonprofit consulting with Equality Utah. Where I do trainings and I love it. And it's like part of my drive to like make the world a better place. I have a bunch of weird side gigs, but one of the things we talk about is gender expression, how expectations that we have for men and women changes according to your location. Like an earring in the Black community can be seen as something very masculine.
Oh, yes.
But like here in Utah, not always the case. Seen as something very feminine. A kilt in Scotland is seen as so masculine. But they'll scroll on and walk through Salt Lake here and people might have a different like experience with it.
Or even like in Jamaican culture, the man is the one that does most of the cooking. And like if you can't cook as a Jamaican man, then like you are looked at in a different way.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, like that's like a big part of Jamaican culture.
See,
from what I understand, and yeah, it's things like that. That
we got to go back to birds.
It's very fluid.
We got to go back to birds, how they do it. Men got to do it all. They got to put on a show. They do all this. They make the nest. And like women birds can just vibe. But yeah, so essentially, I digress.
Yeah,
I'm
let's
the king
go
of
back.
tangents.
So sorry.
Right? No, I'm sorry. I love tangents though, as you can tell. But it essentially has been interesting to see what dating has been like in Utah in general. I remember a long time ago when I was dating women, I was pretending to be into women in the closet. And someone told me, I was like, I think I like you. And she was like, oh, I would never date a Black guy. Right? I know. I was like, whoa. I was like, I'm impressed you said it out loud.
Right, exactly.
Right. I was going to say, at least you told me. That's
Most people would use something coded like urban.
Yes.
But
cultural differences.
Yes. But I do feel, and that's the thing about issues with like prejudice is like, unless someone issues you a card, it's hard to be like, you know what I mean? Like, it's hard to just know exactly what it is. But I think dating here, and some of my people of color, they've also had experiences with dating in the queer community where it's just, I mean, I think of like it's a homogenous community and there's a standard of beauty here and it seems very clear in how people interact that they love them some white dudes, tall white dudes, and I am neither of those. But I will say though, like it's not like I'm sitting at home and I'm like, oh man, no one's gonna like darn it. Like, I feel like if someone has that vibe, like I don't want to be around that person anyways, you know?
Right.
So like, hey, like filter yourself out. Let me filter my way out. Let's find you go hang out over there if that's your energy. I don't know. But I have a lot of friends who are constantly trying to check in with themselves to be like, is this something a decision I'm making as a preference, or is this like rooted in some like part of racism that I'm not aware of, which I think is cool.
Yeah.
I don't know how to change that per se, but I think it's got to start with trying to be aware at least, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
No, you did.
I would say you did. I love all the tangents we've been going on to.
Yeah.
I'm learning a lot.
King of tangents.
Well, and I not love, but I think it's interesting to see how there are, differences, obviously, between dating a straight person, dating someone who's queer in Utah, but also as Black people, that is still like a shared experience, no matter what our sexuality is, right?
The fetishization of
that
it
is
all.
just right. Like those are things that are present, and so it just again goes to show how present anti-Blackness is, or just like racism overall, and how deeply embedded it is into our society. Is that it even shows up amongst other people who are still marginalized? They still experience that and deal with, working through their own biases and discrimination, and you receiving that in a community that is like a double refuge for you almost.
And I will say, I think it is very important to note that with my experiences, I feel like I have a huge point of privilege, especially here in Utah, where, sorry. I was laughing at that. Anyways, I feel like I experienced a lot of privilege in Utah because of Studio C. Like I worked on the show. I garnered a lot of fans. A lot of people like knew who I was, like welcomed me in their home, were surprised when I came out, but they were like, "Oh, we know you." Like some people would come on my Instagram and be like, "How dare you be gay?" And then 15 people would like jump them in the comments. Like, right? I've been pulled over before, which every time I get pulled over, I put on my voice recorder because I'm like, who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah.
And I've had cops be like, "Yo, I love your work. Don't even worry about a ticket." And I'm like, listen, privilege is not bad all the time, right?
Right. Yeah.
But being unaware of it can be problematic. And so my experiences of being queer and Black in Utah, not that I did Studio C the whole time, but it's different than like, I think like for sure everyone's gonna have a different experience depending on like, who we are, our intersectionality. But yeah, I'm just saying like I don't think it's, always the same. And I think I have a little bit of privilege of that.
That is a good point.
Were you gonna say that?
No.
I'm just kidding.
No. Like
I want to call you out for your privilege.
No. Like I like that in the sense of, I think that's something that needs to be added to conversations more when we are having conversations about marginalization or like anything in that way, that multiple things can be true at once. For example, like I am a Black woman, yes, but I am also a light-skinned Black woman, right? Like my experience is very different than like my friends who are 4 or 5 shades darker than me, right? Like we are both Black women, but I need to also acknowledge that in conversations, when it comes to different situations and whatnot, in different parts of discrimination and Blackness. And I think that is something that we need to be okay with too. And I think that's something that I hope, as someone who works in inclusion and all these things, that's something I want to incorporate more. Just because like you can have these ways that you're marginalized, but other ways that you're in privilege, right? Like I'm a Black woman, but I'm straight, right? So like I have these ways in which I'm marginalized, but I have other ways in which I have privilege that I need to leverage, right? And use and be aware of in my conversation, because I feel like we've all encountered people who have some type of identity that makes them marginalized, and then they don't recognize the privilege that they also have at the same time. And you look at them kind of sideways because they speak as if that one thing or two things define their entire identity, which they do in a lot of ways, but sometimes they're ignoring the other ways in which they have privilege, and it makes it hard because they don't seem just like self-aware of the ways in which their experience is still slightly different because of those privileges.
Yeah. I feel like whenever you hear people say, "I'm not privileged, I had to work growing up," I'm like, oh yeah, we don't know what privilege means in this context. Or we were like using different definitions or something. Because I think, and maybe I would love to get your thoughts on this. My mindset with privilege is always, I don't think you should lose your privileges. I just think we want other people to have the same ones.
Yeah.
Like privilege isn't a bad thing. well, I don't want you to be like, I don't want you to lose whatever privilege you may or may not have, but I would love for everyone to have the same access to trust from the community, or you know what confidence from, like I think that's what when I think of privilege, that's how I frame it. And like it's good. Let's share the wealth, right?
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, like you said, privilege is a good thing. It's not something that we hate. What we hate is like the refusal to acknowledge it, or not being aware that you have it, or using it, like weaponizing it against someone else, you know?
Right.
Those are, and that's why we talk about white privilege a lot, because a lot of times that's used to the detriment of other people of color, right? So I think
experiences I've had at BYU where someone starts yelling at me and then they start crying.
Ooh.
And then all of a sudden,
Not the white tears.
the tears, man.
Not the white tears.
Man, until
I can't with the white tears.
I
I
have to like
pack
sit
up.
down my friends and be like, this is a model. I was once dating a guy, super great guy, white dude. And every conversation I have with a white person before I date them is like, I'm gonna need you to use your privilege for good. Like, I'm gonna need you to use your white privilege for good. So if something happens to me, I'm gonna need you to back me up.
Right.
And if we can't do that, that's indicated for me we shouldn't have this relationship.
Period.
But yeah, at all point, I'm like, listen, if there's conditions
From
under
the
this,
jump. That's good. Yes.
But one time, this girl came online and she was like, wickedness never was happiness. Like she like roasted me in the comments, which I love a good roast because I like to roast back. I'll bring a roast too.
Right.
And I kind of like roasted her, and it wasn't even like a roast. I just like called her
Clap
out.
back.
And then she like in the messages was like, people are being mean to me. Like I didn't mean to. And my boyfriend at the time was like, hey, I think you're being a little hard on her. And I was like, let's talk about white tears.
Yes.
I was like, this is what we're not going to do. We're not going to take someone who initiated a conversation.
Absolutely.
And then once they start feeling some of the heat that they were putting out.
Oh, yes.
She came at me telling me how wrong my life was. I didn't even tell her how wrong her life was. I was just like, this is a weird way to think. Own your words. If people start coming for you, that's between you and how you feel.
Yep.
But I was like, we're not going to take this attacker who all of a sudden wants to become a victim and validate them because they're claiming victimhood. I was like, sorry. Yeah. I was like, I'm not going to do that. And I was very adamant about it. And he was like, damn, like, that's something I never thought of. I'm seeing the situation, which I appreciate that he did. But yeah, that was very frustrating.
I'm sure, yeah, but you know, I know that was definitely frustrating, but it's good that you were able to have that conversation with him, and then also that he was able to actually listen, you know, at least to some extent.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's a sweetheart. He didn't want anyone to feel bad. He doesn't want people to be hurt, like most people, right?
Right.
But in that situation, it's like, at what expense? Like I once had, I'm trying to be careful how I talk about this, but there was a job I had that I might have referred to already. And it was weird. Like I was treated so differently by this person who we worked with in this category. They no longer work for BYU TV or anything, but I was treated so differently by this person to the point where I was like, I don't know why, but I know that something's kind of off here. Anyways, one day I asked them a question and they just like, it wasn't even like, why are you doing this? I was like, oh, I'm going to go grab something real quick. They freak out. They start screaming at me. And I was like, what's
the issue?
I was like, what is going on? And I think they realized that they were just like, and I think they knew I was a scapegoat. They knew they could yell at me and it wouldn't be an issue. No one would do anything about it. They probably deserved it. But the second people started being like, hey, you can't treat him like that, they started crying. And then the second they started crying, people were like, what did you do to her? And I literally, luckily, it was one of those few occasions where I had someone that had been there the whole time and they were like, Stacey did nothing. This was a completely deranged behavior. Anyways, I think of experiences like that where white tears have been weaponized against me, and it is so frustrating.
Yeah.
Yep.
Frustrating, and it can be scary too.
Yes.
Because if there was not that person there to like let them know, hey, this is what happened, then you would have been the one.
And it wasn't the first time that was done to me too. And that was one of the few times that I had someone there though.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, we think about historically, that's why it's scary. It's more than just, oh, you said this to me and now I'm being perceived for something I didn't do. But look at Emmett Till, right? That's a example of like white tears, right? Like this, you're perceiving it this way, and now you're upset, and someone died because of it, and that happened. That's not the only time that happened, right? That has happened multiple times throughout history, and so that is why it is dangerous. And so, to our listeners, I'm just saying, you're a white person listening, think about the ways, and that's why we talk about nice racism or white fragility, because us joking about white tears, saying that falls in that category of that fragility, in the sense of like when you're finally having to recognize your role in something and being so like, ooh, you're so uncomfortable by that you kind of start backing away from it and like trying to push it back on the other person. Think of the ways in which if you're feeling that while what we're saying, if that's what you're feeling, right, while what we're talking about, maybe you need to look at the ways in which you are not allowing yourself to be uncomfortable, to truly actually overcome the ways in which you are working through your biases, or the ways in which discrimination shows up in your own life, and subconsciously as well, because that's a lot of it too. We all get defensive when people are calling us out on things that we kind of know are true deep down. And so I think a lot of that comes too, is that's defensiveness from white people not wanting to call themselves out almost, because like they think that it says something about their character. Like, White Fragility says in that book, it's not about your character. It's just, that's the reality of the world that we live in. And once we get past that and just recognize that is the truth, that's how I feel. I see that as me as being a straight person. Anytime I have anything that comes in where I'm like feeling some type of way about anything dealing with the queer community, it's like, oh, this makes sense. Like, I'm not offended at myself. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, oh yeah, I was raised in a heteronormative culture. No wonder this, or I didn't see this way, or I thought it this way, as I've, worked through my own things. And I just hope that other people can start doing that as well and not get so pressed.
Yeah, I think too, it's like, sometimes it's like I tell people all the time, I'm like, you know what? It's totally fine. In my interactions with people, I'm like, it's totally fine to be defensive. Like, that's a normal human reaction. Someone calls you out for something, whether it's like a significant other or a friend, it's okay to get defensive. But like, what do you do with that information?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do we get defensive and refuse to think about it? Do we like maybe get defensive and try to sit with, okay, why do they feel this way? Is there any reason behind this? Like, I think it's okay to be frustrated and to be like, and in my interactions, I'm like, it's okay. That's like normal.
Yeah.
We're not wired to be challenged and then be like, yay, like that's not like how humans are built. But like, what do you do with that information? Because that for me is the bigger takeaway. And if you do get defensive, like, and say something, you need to fix it. If you shut up, you know what you're talking about. Apologize and be like, you did know what you're talking. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, feel like it feels, but like, take care of it.
Amen.
Love that. Love that.
Okay.
Well, to wrap it up, one last question for you.
Yes.
And then we'll move on to our recommendations. If you could give advice to Black kids coming into Utah, if you could give advice to queer people coming into Utah or already living here, just people who experience the same or similar intersections to yourself, what advice would you give them on how to survive this climate?
Oof. That last part, how to survive this climate. Oof, because a lot of people don't, which is unfortunate. I think my biggest thing to people is your greatest strength is going to be your authenticity. And that can apply to your sexuality, your gender expression, your gender, your race, your ethnic background, your culture, your preference, your beliefs. Like, your authenticity is going to be your greatest weapon. And when you fight your sense of authenticity, like what's real for you, you are fighting yourself, and you're going to be limiting yourself and what you can accomplish and do. And so be your authentic self. And if people have problems with that, it's personal. It's not about you. That's their own issues. It's like easier said than done, right? Because we all want belonging and stuff. But like, if people have issues with that, that's between them and their therapist. Like, you're moving on and growing. We're not going to let Jane Doe hold us back because she doesn't like the gays. I don't know.
Yeah.
You're right.
I love that. Greatest strength is your authenticity.
Let's go, baby.
That's a word.
Yes.
Cool.
Recommendations? So we have this portion in every episode where you can give a recommendation, and it can be anything. And when we mean anything, we really mean anything.
Like media or something like that?
Movie, show, song, artist, food, activity. We have recommended all types of stuff in here. I have recommended Body Wash twice. So, yes, you can do whatever you want. And I can go first this week if we want. So my recommendation for the week, I know last week I recommended food. I'm going to recommend food again. I made a charcuterie board yesterday.
Ooh, she fancy.
Yes, it actually was not that hard, and it wasn't crazy expensive. And it actually tasted good because eating it and I liked it. I felt bad because I've talked so much shit about charcuterie boards. Because in Utah, they use them as real meals at events, and I have been let down. Nate knows this.
Yes.
He's been with me at events where they want to give you a charcuterie board as a meal, and I'm like, excuse me?
How am I supposed to survive on this dried up apricot and almonds?
Come on. Now, it's a good side. We had other stuff that I ate with this charcuterie board, but I say make one. They're really cute, and they're fun, and if, like, I'm not creative, but I like to cook, and so like food is like my kind of creativity, and so I think it was like a combination of me pushing myself and trying to make it look nice, but also like making good food and combining good things, and you can really make it whatever you want, which is really nice, and you can make it as big or as small as you want. Like I made mine for 2 people, so I recommend trying to make a charcuterie board this summer at some point and making, take you a little aesthetic photo at the park or something. So
don't act like don't say you just made a charcuterie board for 2 and don't like I want the story. That sounds cute AF.
Oh, I mean, it was for a date with my boyfriend.
A charcuterie board for 2. That's serious.
No.
I'm just kidding.
Yes. Okay, but
she got the charcuterie board.
Yes, Nate, onto your recommendation.
All right, let's take it off of Rachel because she over here blushing. My recommendation for this week: Queen Charlotte. If y'all haven't watched you some Queen Charlotte on Netflix,
I love that a man is recommending this.
On it right away.
Is that the Bridgerton?
Yes, it's the
It's
Bridgerton
like
spinoff.
spin-off.
It's better than Bridgerton in my opinion. It's about. I mean, like I love Bridgerton. Don't get me wrong. I love
do
Bridgerton.
too.
But the
I'm
story
recording
of
this
Queen Charlotte and her boo.
I'm recording this for my boyfriend. He's like refuses to watch Bridgerton or anything.
Tell to come over here. And we can watch it together.
Okay.
We'll watch it together.
Okay.
We're watching Queen Charlotte. Is that what's happening? I'm inviting myself.
Yes, let's do a watch party.
I'm just telling you right
serious.
now.
Let's do it.
I'm inviting myself. I'll bring a charcuterie board. Have you seen that post?
Yes, I know what you're talking about. Yes.
This girl's like, made a charcuterie board.
Yes.
And I'm like, I call them that all the time now.
Yes.
That's so funny.
But no, yes, bring the. That's what you're gonna take my recommendation and Nate's in one by making the charcuterie board to the watch
I love
party.
making charcuterie boards, by the way, and I do them a little different because I'm I want a heaping pile, like a.
Interesting. Have you ever made like the rose at a lunch meet?
No.
Well, I've done that before.
So then you're not that bad. No,
That's not. Maybe I am making charcuterie boards and not charcuterie boards because that's fancy.
Oh man, yeah, I've done that before. You just take like a wine glass and then you just fold the meat over it like in layers, and then you turn it over and it looks like a flower. So I've done that before. You
take
put the
a
meat
wine
and you
glass,
take crackers
fold the meat over in layers.
Yes.
You have to show me that because my brain is like not getting it.
Maybe I'll make one here soon. We can all get together,
bring a little,
have a charcuterie board, and watch Queen Charlotte. It'll be a triple feature.
Kane,
my recommendation. I was telling you about this earlier before we started. I'm gonna get canceled for this. I know it, but I'm gonna say it anyways.
Come on.
It's Jordan Sparks' Red Sangria.
Oh my gosh.
The song has been out for a minute. I just discovered it. The internet, it was like her comeback song, and the internet came for her because they were like, listen, this sounds like an Old Navy commercial. And people actually took the music video and put like Old Navy logos over it. And I like it. I like it. I was in my room learning the dance the other day. So check out Red Sangria. Okay. And if you don't like it, that's a personal problem between you and your therapist.
I love it. Well, cool. I think that's all we got. I'm gonna check out Red Sangria right after this.
Yes.
Don't judge me.
Yes, that's it.
Well, we appreciate y'all. Thanks for being on another episode tuning in to another episode of the Black Ministers Podcast, and we will catch y'all next week.